My name is Maya, and for most of my life, I've been told that being an orphan meant I should be grateful for whatever scraps life decided to throw at me. People think that when you lose your parents young, you automatically learn to be tough. But the truth, you just learn how to hide pain better. I was 6 when I lost them in a car accident. My father was an engineer, my mother a teacher. Simple, honest people who loved me fiercely. After the funeral, no one really wanted to take me in. My relatives held quiet discussions in corners, whispering things like, "Who'll pay for her schooling?" and "She's such a burden." In the end, my father's distant sister, Aunt Shanty, reluctantly agreed to take me. She wasn't cruel, exactly, but she wasn't warm either. I became more of a house helper than a niece, cooking, cleaning, running errands, and working quietly in the background while she bragged about her own children. I didn't complain, because who would listen? By the time I turned 21, I'd learned that love wasn't something people gave freely. It was something you had to earn. I got my college degree through scholarships, worked part-time, and dreamed of starting a life of my own one day. But dreams don't mean much when you don't have money or family support. So when Aunt Shanty told me one evening, "There's a proposal for you, Maya, from the Mera family," I froze. I knew who they were. One of the richest families in the city. Their empire stretched across real estate, hotels, and tech. They were the kind of people who lived behind high gates and tinted car windows. Why would they want me? I asked quietly. She didn't even look up from her tea. It's not that kind of proposal. Their elder son, Rohan, just returned from abroad. Their family astrologer says he needs a calm traditional influence in his life. They think you're suitable. Suitable, I repeated. Not loved, not chosen, just suitable. Her expression hardened. Maya, you should be thankful. Do you have any idea what kind of life you could have there? You'll never have to worry about rent or bills again. Isn't that what every girl wants? Her words stung, because deep down, I knew she didn't care about my happiness. She cared about getting rid of her responsibility. The next week, I met the Mera family. Their mansion was massive. Marble floors, golden chandeliers, and staff that moved silently like shadows. Mrs. Mera sat in the center of the living room like a queen. Her pearls gleamed as she spoke. "You've done your graduation?" she asked. "Yes, Mom," I replied softly. "In literature." She frowned slightly. "Not very practical, but you seem obedient. You don't talk much, do you?" I shook my head. She smiled. Not kindly, but approvingly. "Good. My son doesn't like girls who talk too much." Rohan, sitting beside her, barely looked up from his phone. He was tall, confident, and cold. When Mrs. Mera finally gestured toward me, he gave me one brief glance and said, "This is her." Fine. That was it. No greeting, no smile. Just fine. And that single word echoed in my mind all the way home. The wedding was arranged within a month. Aunt Shanty couldn't stop bragging about it to her neighbors. "My niece is marrying into the Mera family." I stood through it all like a doll. The rituals, the photographs, the polite smiles. Everything was beautiful on the outside, but empty inside. Even during the vows, Rohan barely looked at me. And when the priest announced I was husband and wife, Mrs. Mera whispered to someone beside her, "At least she looks decent. People won't question our choice too much." That night, I entered the Mera mansion as their new daughter-in-law. No one greeted me. The house was filled with silence, cold and suffocating. I tried to fit in. I woke up early, made breakfast, learned their routines. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. If the tea was too strong, Mrs. Mera would sigh. Clearly she wasn't raised with refinement. If I stayed quiet at family dinners, she'd remark, "She's so timid. A girl without parents should be more grateful." And Rohan, he barely acknowledged my existence. He spent most of his time outside, at meetings, at the gym, or with his friends. Sometimes he didn't come home at all. When he did, he'd toss his jacket on the couch and mutter, "Don't wait up." I stopped asking questions. After the first time he glared and said, "You don't get to question me, Maya. This isn't some romantic movie." He was right. It wasn't. It was a well-decorated prison. I began keeping a diary, my only friend. I wrote down everything I couldn't say aloud. Every humiliation, every cruel glance, every dream that died quietly inside me. Sometimes I'd sit by the window, watching the city lights, and wonder if my parents could see me from wherever they were. Would they be proud? Or would they cry? The only person in that house who treated me with kindness was Kemla, the maid. One evening, as she poured me tea, she whispered, "Don't lose your heart, Betty. People like them only respect power." You'll see, at the time her words felt impossible. Power, me. I didn't even have a voice, but fate has a strange way of waiting. A few months later, while dusting the old library that no one ever entered, I found a photograph inside a worn-out book. It showed my father standing beside another man I didn't recognize, in front of a company logo that read, "Singania Textiles, Pafit Limited." I didn't understand why the photo was there or what it meant, but I slipped it into my diary anyway. That same week, I overheard Mr. and Mrs. Mera arguing in the study. "Our hospitality project is bleeding money." Mrs. Mera hissed, "Then talk to your son. He's wasting resources." Mr. Mera snapped back, "We need investors, fast." That night, as I wrote in my diary, I realized something. The family that looked down on me wasn't invincible. They had cracks. And through those cracks, light sometimes finds a way in. I didn't know it then, but that old photograph would change everything. The girl they called the charity case bride was about to become the woman who owned everything they ever desired. The first few months of my marriage felt like walking on glass. Every step I took was careful, quiet, and filled with fear of being cut by their words. Mrs. Mera had made it clear from day one. I was not to act like a wife, but rather like an accessory, something to display when guests visited, and to ignore the rest of the time. "You should be seen, not heard," she would say, sipping her morning tea. A good daughter-in-law never draws attention to herself, so I became invisible. I moved like a shadow through that house, setting the table, helping the servants, ironing Rohan's shirts, never once hearing a "thank you." Rohan, meanwhile, carried on with his life as if I didn't exist. When we passed each other in the hallway, he barely nodded. His phone was always glued to his hand. Sometimes, I'd hear him laughing softly while talking to someone. I didn't need to guess who. Once, while bringing tea to his study, I overheard his conversation. He was speaking to a woman, his voice low and affectionate, the tone he never used with me. "Come on, baby," he whispered. "You know this marriage means nothing. It's just something my parents forced on me. You're the one I actually want." I froze, the tray trembling in my hands. The sound of ice clinking in the teacups was the only thing that betrayed my presence. He noticed me in the doorway and ended the call immediately. His eyes narrowed. "Don't eavesdrop, Maya." I wasn't. "Then learn to knock," he said coldly, brushing past me. The tray nearly slipped from my hands as his shoulder hit mine. That night, I cried quietly under my blanket, not because I loved him, but because I realized I was truly alone in that house. Even the walls seemed to whisper, "You don't belong here." Every morning started with judgment. Mrs. Mera would inspect me like I was some unpaid intern, failing at her job. "The rotis are too thick. The curry is too bland. Why do you always look so tired? Do you think we brought you here to rest?" She loved reminding me of my place. Once, while a few guests were visiting, she smiled sweetly and said, "This is my daughter-in-law, Maya. We took her in because her aunt begged us." Poor girl didn't have anyone else. They smiled politely, pity flickering in their eyes. My cheeks burned. Later that night, I asked her quietly, "Why did you say that?" She raised an eyebrow. "Say what?" "That you took me in out of pity." Her lips curved into a cruel smirk. "Because it's true, isn't it? Don't fool yourself, Maya. You weren't chosen because of love or status. You were chosen because you were convenient. My son needed a wife. You needed a home. It's that simple." Her words cut deeper than any slap could. That night, I stood before the mirror, staring at my reflection. The cinder in my hairline looked more like a wound than a mark of marriage. I whispered to myself, "Don't cry. They want to see you break." So, I didn't. I tucked the pain deep inside and carried on. One afternoon, Rohan's friends came over for a casual dinner. Mrs. Mehra wanted to impress them, so she made me cook an elaborate meal. I spent hours in the kitchen, chopping, frying, sweating, trying to make everything perfect. But when they finally sat down to eat, one of his friends laughed. "So, this is the famous charity wife." Everyone laughed, even Rohan. My hands trembled as I poured water into their glasses. Mrs. Mehra smiled like she didn't hear the insult. "Don't mind him," she said. "They joke like that all the time," but I could see the pride in her eyes. She enjoyed watching me humiliated. When the guests left, Rohan came to our room and said flatly, "Try not to embarrass me next time." You looked desperate. I wasn't. Don't explain. Just stay out of sight. He walked out again, leaving me staring at the closed door. I started spending more time in the old library, the quietest corner of the mansion. It smelled of old paper and dust. Oddly comforting, because at least books didn't judge me. Sometimes I'd read for hours, losing myself in stories where women found courage, freedom, love. In those pages, I could almost forget who I was. It was there, one rainy afternoon, that I met Mr. Arjun Mehta, an old friend of my late father. He arrived at the mansion to speak with Mr. Mehra about some business matter. But when he saw me in the hallway, his eyes widened. "You're Rajiv's daughter, aren't you?" he asked softly. I nodded, surprised. "You knew my father." He smiled sadly. "Very well. We worked together for years. You look just like him." Before I could ask more, Mrs. Mehra appeared, smiling stiffly. "Ah, Mr. Mehta, please come in. Maya, don't bother our guest." But before leaving, he pressed a small business card into my hand and whispered, "Call me when you can. It's important." That night, I hid the card in my diary. My heart was pounding. What could he possibly have to tell me? Meanwhile, things in the Mehra household were not as perfect as they appeared. Mr. Mehra spent hours arguing on the phone with partners. Mrs. Mehra stopped hosting parties. Rohan came home drunk more often than not. Once, I overheard them whispering in the living room. "We need new investors," Mr. Mehra said. "The hotel chain is collapsing." Then talk to Rohan. "He's supposed to handle the accounts." Mrs. Mehra snapped. "He's useless." He yelled back, "I should have married him to someone from a business family, not that orphan girl." The words stabbed deep, but this time, something inside me didn't crumble. It burned. I thought about the photograph I had found in the library. My father standing next to that unknown man in front of a company logo. I thought about Mr. Mehta's face when he saw me. The shock, the urgency. For the first time since my marriage, I felt something new flicker inside me. Not hope exactly, but something close. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as powerless as they thought. Days later, when I finally found the courage, I went to a payphone near the market, far from the Mehra mansion, and dialed the number on the card. The line clicked. "Maya!" Mr. Mehta's voice came through, calm but warm. "I was waiting for your call." "I don't understand," I said. "You said it was important." "Yes," he replied. "It's about your parents, specifically your father's business." "My father's business?" "Rajiv and I co-founded Singhania Textiles," he said slowly. Before the accident, your father owned 40% of the company, but after his death, there was confusion about inheritance. I tried reaching your guardian, but your aunt refused to cooperate. She said you weren't interested. Maya, you're still listed as a legal shareholder, and with Mr. Singhania's recent passing, you've just inherited his shares as well. I couldn't breathe. What are you saying? I'm saying, my dear, he said kindly, you're now the majority owner of a textile company worth more than you can imagine. For a long moment, I stood there in stunned silence, the phone trembling in my hands. The girl everyone mocked for being the charity case bride was now wealthier than the entire Mehra family combined, and I hadn't even told them yet. I don't remember much about my wedding day. There were no flowers of my choice, no laughter from friends, and no tears of joy. Just whispers, judging eyes, and a suffocating silence that wrapped around me tighter than the veil they forced on my head. Mrs. Malik, my new mother-in-law, stood proudly at the front, smiling like a queen who had just secured her castle's expansion. She didn't even look at me when I walked in. She just whispered to a guest, "Poor thing. She doesn't even know what she's marrying into." And she was right. I didn't. Rehan, my husband, sat beside me, distant and cold. He didn't look angry, but he looked empty, like someone who'd given up before the game even started. He didn't hold my hand, didn't smile, didn't even fake it for the photos. When the ceremony ended, I became Mrs. Rehan Malik, but I didn't feel like anyone's wife. I felt like property, a transaction, the orphan girl with no dowry, no family, no name, just a pawn in someone else's plan. That night, as we reached his family's mansion, a massive cold house with more rooms than people, Mrs. Malik gave me a tour like I was a new servant. "This is the kitchen," she said, tapping her heels on the tiles. "You'll be spending most of your time here. I hope you know how to cook." I nodded, even though my throat was burning with humiliation. She smirked. "Good, because we don't keep useless women in this house." Her daughter Samira chimed in from the stairs. "Or orphans." The laughter that followed felt like knives. Rehan said nothing, not a single word. That night, I slept on the edge of the bed while he stared at the ceiling. We were strangers, bound by a contract signed by his mother and a distant lawyer. Days turned into weeks. I tried to win them over, waking early, cooking, cleaning, trying to prove I wasn't useless. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. Mrs. Malik would criticize everything. "That the curry's too salty. You can't even fold clothes properly. You're nothing like my late daughter-in-law." The one thing that hurt the most wasn't the insults. It was Rehan's silence. He never defended me, never stopped them. He just stayed out of it. One evening, I overheard Mrs. Malik talking to him in the study. "Rehan," she said, her tone sharp, "I don't care what you do, but that girl can't stay here forever. She's a burden. You married her for convenience, not love. Don't forget that. Convenience." That word echoed in my chest for days. Later that night, when I quietly asked him why he married me, he sighed and said, "My mother insisted. She said it would look charitable. An orphan girl, given a home. It helps our image." He didn't even look at me when he said it. That night, I cried quietly, staring at the ring on my finger. It felt heavier than gold. It was guilt, shame, and loneliness melted into metal. But I refused to break. Every insult hardened me. Every humiliation reminded me that I had no one to rely on but myself. So I started saving. The little money I got for groceries, I began keeping a portion aside. I found small tailoring jobs online, late at night when everyone else was asleep. And slowly, I began to rebuild something, a spark of independence. But I didn't know then that my spark would soon turn into a wildfire, because one letter, one simple piece of paper, was about to change everything. It arrived 3 months later, a plain brown envelope with my name written in elegant handwriting. I didn't recognize it at first, but when I saw the sender's name, my heart stopped. It was from the law firm that handled my orphanage's trust fund. I tore it open with shaking hands. Inside there was a letter, short, formal, and life-changing. It read, "We are writing to inform you that as the legal heir of the late Mr. Samir Arif, founder of Arif Textiles, you are entitled to claim his remaining estate. Please contact us immediately to discuss the inheritance process. Samir Arif, the billionaire who owned half the factories in Lahore." I thought it was a mistake, a cruel joke, but then I remembered something faint, something the orphanage matron once said when I was a child. "Your parents weren't poor, my dear. They were just gone too soon." I didn't understand it back then, but now, it made sense. I was the unknown heir, the girl they all pitied, was about to inherit a fortune, and suddenly, the wedding ring that once felt like a chain started to feel like a key. I must have read that letter 20 times. My heart was racing, my hands trembling. It felt too good to be true, like one of those dreams that dissolves the moment you wake up. For days, I hid the letter in the hem of my old shawl. I couldn't let anyone find it. Not Mrs. Malik, not Rayhan, not even the maids who reported everything they saw. But it burned in my thoughts every waking moment. Who was Mr. Samir Arif to me? Why would I be his heir? Finally, when I couldn't take it anymore, I called the number written at the bottom. A calm voice answered. "Good afternoon, Arif and Sons Legal Associates. How may I help you?" I swallowed hard. "I received a letter. My name is Noor." The voice softened instantly. "Ah, Miss Noor, we've been trying to contact you for months. When can you visit our office? There's a matter that needs your signature." The next morning, I told Mrs. Malik I was going to the tailor's market. She barely looked up from her teacup. "Don't take too long. Dinner won't cook itself." When I reached the law firm, a tall glass building that looked far too fancy for someone like me, I felt small again, like that scared orphan who didn't belong anywhere. A receptionist greeted me and led me into a quiet office lined with mahogany shelves. Behind a large desk sat a middle-aged man with kind eyes. "Miss Noor," he said, standing to shake my hand. "I'm Advocate Rauf. Please, have a seat." He slid a file toward me and opened it slowly. Inside were photographs. An older man with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Do you recognize him?" he asked. I shook my head. He nodded thoughtfully. "His name was Samir Arif. He was your mother's brother, your maternal uncle. He never married or had children. When your parents passed away, you were still a baby. He searched for you for years, but by the time we found records of your adoption, he was already very ill." I felt the air leave my chest. An uncle. I had family. I had someone who cared. The lawyer continued. "Before he passed, he wrote you into his will as the sole beneficiary of his remaining assets, his shares, his villa, his company accounts. The estate is valued at roughly 72 crore rupees." I froze. 72 crore, I whispered, as if saying it out loud might break the spell. He smiled gently. "Yes, Miss Noor, all legally yours. You'll need to complete some formalities to transfer the holdings." I signed the documents with trembling hands, feeling like my world had been flipped upside down. For the first time in my life, I wasn't powerless, but as I left the office clutching the envelope of paperwork, I knew one thing for sure. I had to keep it a secret. For now, the Malik family would destroy me if they knew. For the next few weeks, I played my role perfectly. I cooked, cleaned, smiled when spoken to, and pretended to be the same silent girl they looked down on. But inside, something had shifted. When Mrs. Malik insulted my cooking, I smiled and said, "I'll try again." When Samira mocked my clothes, I simply said, You're right. They're old. Because soon, I wouldn't have to explain myself to any of them. One afternoon, while I was hanging laundry, I overheard Mrs. Malik and Samira talking on the balcony. She's so quiet lately, Samira said. Do you think she's planning something? Mrs. Malik scoffed. That girl, please. She's too timid to plan her own meals. They laughed, and I smiled to myself. Let them think that. In silence, I began preparing my escape. I rented a small storage unit outside the city and started sending the lawyer all necessary documents under that address. Each visit to the law firm brought new developments, transfers, deeds, account updates. It felt surreal. Every signature was a step toward my new life. But fate, as always, had its way of testing me. One evening, I returned home earlier than usual and found Mrs. Malik in my room, holding the brown envelope. Her face was red with rage. What is this? She demanded. Who is Mr. Samir Arif? Why are lawyers sending you letters? My stomach dropped. It's just paperwork from the orphanage, I stammered. Don't lie to me, she snapped. You think you can hide things under my roof? Rayhan appeared behind her, frowning. What's going on? Mrs. Malik turned to him, waving the letter. Your wife has secrets, big ones. I think our charity case has been fooling us all along. My throat felt dry. My mind raced. If they knew the truth, they'd find a way to take it, to control it. So I looked her straight in the eyes for the first time and said, It's nothing that concerns you. Mrs. Malik, it's my business. She blinked in disbelief. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Rayhan looked between us, confused. What's happening, Noor? I turned to him, calm and steady. You'll find out soon enough. And I walked away. That night, I packed a small bag, hid my papers, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. For the first time, I didn't see a frightened orphan or a powerless wife. I saw a woman who was about to take back her life. I didn't sleep that night. Every tick of the clock felt like thunder in my chest. I knew what I had to do, but fear kept whispering. What if they find you? What if they take it all back? What if you're still that helpless orphan? But that voice, the one that always told me I wasn't enough, wasn't in charge anymore. By dawn, I had made my decision. I packed a few clothes, my documents, and the one photograph I had from the orphanage. Then I slipped quietly out of the Malik mansion, leaving behind the life that had buried me for so long. The city was just waking up. The streets smelled like dust, tea, and morning hope. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking to serve someone else. I was walking toward myself. I took a small apartment downtown, one of the properties my lawyer had helped me transfer discreetly into my name. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. 4 walls that didn't echo with insults, a bed that didn't belong to a stranger, a window that opened to freedom. I remember sitting on that floor, clutching my new house keys, whispering to myself, this is what peace feels like. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. The lawyers completed the inheritance process. Money started transferring. My name appeared in official documents. Noor Arif, sole heir to Arif Textiles. I was now one of the wealthiest women in the city. But I didn't rush to change my life. I didn't post anything online, didn't buy anything flashy. I wanted to plan this right, because my revenge wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be poetic. Meanwhile, the Malik household was falling apart. The maids from my old neighborhood whispered updates when I passed through. Rayhan's business was struggling. His mother's social circle was turning on her after a failed investment. And through it all, they kept wondering where I'd gone. Mrs. Malik apparently told people I'd run off in shame. Oh, how that must have bruised her pride. But I had other plans. I visited the Arif Textiles head office a month later, walking through those glass doors, seeing the company logo that shared my name. It was surreal. The employees whispered when I introduced myself. Many didn't know the old owner had left an heir. The board members looked skeptical at first, until my lawyer confirmed everything. By the end of the meeting, the power dynamic had shifted completely. "Miss Noor," one of them said, "you now hold 60% of RF Textiles. That makes you our majority shareholder." For a moment, I just smiled quietly. The girl who used to clean other people's dishes was now signing paychecks for hundreds of employees. And then came the twist I hadn't planned. Rayhan showed up at my office. He looked thinner, desperate, his confidence replaced by confusion. "Noor," he said softly, standing at my door. "I've been trying to find you for weeks." I didn't look up from my desk. "Why?" He hesitated. "My mother. She didn't mean what she said. Things have been hard since you left. I just wanted to talk." Talk? This man, who once couldn't look me in the eye at our wedding, wanted to talk now that I had money? I looked at him coldly. "You never wanted to talk before, Rayhan. You wanted control. And now you've lost both." He frowned. "I didn't know you were rich." I cut him off. Would it have mattered? Would you have treated me better if I had money? His silence said everything. I stood up and walked toward him, my heels echoing against the marble floor. "When I was in your house, you all made me feel small, invisible. But I learned something there. Silence can be power if you use it right." He looked ashamed. "Noor, I shook my head. I don't hate you, Rayhan. You are just weak. But your mother," I smiled faintly. "She's about to learn what it feels like to be powerless." He looked at me, confused and a little scared. "What are you planning?" I didn't answer. I just picked up a document from my desk and handed it to him. It was a property repossession notice for one of the Malik family's failing investments, a textile warehouse they had unknowingly mortgaged to a company under Arif Holdings. "Tell your mother," I said calmly, "that her charity case just bought her debt." His jaw dropped. "You're joking." I smiled. "No, Rayhan, I'm done being a joke." He left without another word. That evening, I sat by my apartment window, watching the city lights shimmer. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving, I was winning. But deep down, I knew the game wasn't over yet. Because women like Mrs. Malik never go down quietly. And if I'd learned anything, it was this: revenge tastes best when it's served slow and undeniable. When you grow up being told you're nothing, you start believing it. That you don't deserve kindness. That silence is safety. That endurance is strength. But standing there, at the top floor of the Arif Textiles building, watching my signature appear on company documents worth millions, I realized something. The world doesn't hand you dignity. You take it back, piece by piece. It had been 3 weeks since Rehan's visit. The Malik family had gone quiet, but not for long. I was sitting in my office when my assistant rushed in. "Mom," she said, hesitating, "there's someone downstairs demanding to see you." I looked up from my paperwork. "Who?" "She says she's your mother-in-law, Mrs. Malik." For a moment, I just stared. Of course she came. The storm I'd been waiting for. "Send her up," I said quietly. A few minutes later, the door burst open. Mrs. Malik walked in, draped in her usual luxury, but with a shadow of panic behind her polished expression. Her eyes scanned the office, the modern furniture, the city skyline behind me. And then finally me. "So," she said, voice dripping with disdain. "It's true. The orphan girl found herself a new costume. I didn't rise to the bait." "It's not a costume, Mrs. Malik. It's a position I earned. Something you wouldn't understand," she smirked. "Don't act high and mighty. You're still the same stray I took pity on. You should be grateful I even let you marry my son." Grateful. That word again. The same word they'd used every time they wanted to remind me I didn't belong. I leaned back in my chair. "You're right. I should be grateful. Because without you, I would have never learned what cruelty looks like up close. Or how to recognize it when it hides behind a smile." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't get clever with me, girl. I know what you did. You tricked some lawyer, stole my husband's contracts, and now you're pretending to be a businesswoman. I stood slowly. Mrs. Malik, I didn't trick anyone. The truth is, I'm the rightful heir of the Arif fortune. Every paper, every document, every signature is legal. You can check if you'd like. Her voice rose. You expect me to believe that nonsense? You, an heir. Her laughter filled the room. Sharp, forced, desperate. I walked around my desk and stood face to face with her. Believe what you want, but here's a fact. You now owe me 50 million rupees. Her laughter stopped. What did you say? The textile warehouse you mortgaged last year. It's now under Arif Holdings. I own it, and I've decided to collect what's due. For the first time, she looked shaken. Her perfect posture faltered. Her hands clenched her bag. You wouldn't dare. Oh, but I already did, I said softly. You see, Mrs. Malik, when you treat people like dirt, you forget they're still made of earth. And earth can bury you if it wants. Her face turned red with fury. You think you've won? You'll regret this, Noor. Society doesn't forget where you came from. I smiled faintly. Maybe, but society also loves a good redemption story. And I'm the living proof that the orphan you look down on can rise higher than you ever dreamed. She opened her mouth to speak again, but the door opened. 2 journalists stepped in, escorted by my assistant. Miss Noor, we're here for the interview you scheduled. I turned to them calmly. Perfect timing. Mrs. Malik here was just leaving. She froze. Interview? You called the media. I looked her dead in the eye. No, they called me. People want to know about the new face of Arif Textiles. The woman rebuilding a legacy, built on honesty and compassion. Her lips trembled. She wasn't used to being dismissed. Enjoy the spotlight, Noor, she hissed. It doesn't last long. I tilted my head. Neither does borrowed wealth. Goodbye, Mrs. Malik. She stormed out, her heels clicking angrily against the marble floor. But before she reached the elevator, she turned and saw something she hadn't expected. Reporters waiting in the lobby, snapping pictures. Her humiliation was public now, and irreversible. The interview went viral that week. From orphan to industry leader, the inspiring rise of Noor Arif. People were fascinated by the story. They wanted to know how a girl from nothing inherited an empire, and why she'd been silent for so long. I didn't talk about revenge. I didn't talk about pain. I talked about resilience, about never letting cruelty define you, about women finding strength in places they were told to hide. But that didn't mean I'd forgotten. Because even as the world praised me, I knew Mrs. Malik wouldn't stop there. She would try to claw her way back. And I was ready. Because the next move wasn't going to be about humiliation. It was going to be about justice. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that some people don't crumble when they lose. They scheme. And Mrs. Malik was the kind of woman who would rather burn everything down than admit defeat. After that humiliating encounter at my office, she disappeared for a while. The city's social circles buzzed with gossip. Some said she'd left for Dubai. Others said she was hiding from creditors. I didn't care. I was too busy turning Arif Textiles into something my uncle would have been proud of. We started women's training programs, opened small factories in underdeveloped towns, and began funding orphan scholarships. Quietly, without press or show. I wanted my wealth to mean something, but just as I started feeling at peace, her shadow returned. It began with subtle things. Vendors pulling out of deals, banks reviewing my accounts, a whisper spreading that my inheritance wasn't legitimate, that I'd forged documents to steal the company. When I first heard it, I thought it was coincidence. But then my lawyer called one evening. Noor, he said gravely, someone submitted a legal complaint against you. They're claiming you falsified your relationship with Mr. Samir Arif. I froze. Who filed it? He sighed. A Mrs. Shabana Malik. I should have known. It was classic her. Turn the narrative, play the victim, twist the truth until it looked clean in her hands. And with her social status, she'd already found sympathizers. Within days, I was being painted as a fraud. The media that once praised me now ran headlines questioning my past. Was Noor Arif really an heir or a master manipulator? I'll admit, for a moment, it broke me. I thought about how quickly people believe lies when told by the rich and confident. But then, I remembered who I was now. I wasn't the orphan hiding behind the kitchen door anymore. So instead of reacting, I planned. I asked my lawyer to let the investigation proceed. Quietly, I began collecting every legal document: birth records, orphanage files, my parents' death certificates, and the original handwritten will my uncle left in his lawyer's possession. Meanwhile, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in months, Rayhan. He sounded wary when he answered. "Noor, why are you calling me?" "I need your help," I said simply. "Why would I help you?" "Because," I said, "I know your mother used your name to file false statements. And when the truth comes out, your business and reputation will go down with hers unless you cooperate." Silence. Then a quiet sigh. "She forged my signature." "Yes," I said, "and I can prove it. But I want you to be there when I do." He hesitated. "What are you planning?" "Justice," I said softly. "Not revenge. Not anymore." A week later, the court summoned me for the hearing. The room was packed. Journalists, lawyers, spectators. And there she was, Mrs. Malik, in her designer clothes, acting the picture of wounded dignity. When the judge called her name, she stood confidently. "Your Honor, I'm here to protect my family's honor from deceit. This woman tricked a dying man and claimed a fortune that doesn't belong to her." The murmurs in the room were sharp, accusing. Then it was my turn. I walked to the stand with my lawyer and placed a folder on the table. Inside were the original notarized documents: my birth certificate, my mother's ID, and my uncle's will, complete with sealed signatures, verified by 2 witnesses. But that wasn't the best part. My lawyer turned. On the projector, Sam played an old video clip retrieved from the late Mr. Arif's estate. Files. The courtroom went silent. On the screen appeared a frail but smiling man, my uncle, recording his last message. "If you're watching this, it means I've passed. My only wish is that my niece Noor finds the life I couldn't give her as a child. She is the daughter of my late sister, Rahila. To her, I leave everything I built." The clip ended. The room was still. Mrs. Malik's face went pale. Her lawyer stammered. "Your Honor, we, need time to verify the authenticity of..." The judge cut him off. "The court recognizes this video as valid evidence. Case dismissed. Miss Noor Arif's inheritance stands." Gasps echoed. Cameras flashed. Mrs. Malik's carefully built mask shattered right there in front of everyone. Her eyes darted toward Rayhan, who sat in the back of the courtroom, silent and still. He didn't go to her. He just whispered, "I told you this would happen, Ami." Before walking out, when the reporters rushed toward me, I simply said, "I don't believe in destroying people. I believe in letting truth destroy their lies." That evening, headlines exploded again. Only this time, they told the truth. Court confirms. Noor Arif, true heir of Arif Textiles. False accusations exposed. Malik family faces legal inquiry. Mrs. Malik's empire crumbled overnight. Investors backed out. Her luxury properties went under audit. Her social circle, those very people she used to impress, turned their backs. As for me, I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I sat by my window that night, drinking tea, watching the rain fall over the city that once mocked me. I'd fought every inch of my way to stand here, but I didn't feel revenge. I felt closure, because the girl they once silenced had spoken, and the world had finally listened. After that night, everything changed. I didn't just own the house. I owned my story, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to tell it. The next morning, I called my lawyer and asked him to start the process of rebranding the orphanage under a new name, the Hope Foundation for Lost Girls. It would be in honor of the girls who never had a chance. The ones like me, who were told they were nothing. The foundation became my life. I poured everything into it. We offered scholarships, safe housing, education, and emotional therapy. I made sure every girl who walked through those doors never felt the humiliation I had endured. But success has a way of drawing the ones who once spat on you, because just a few months after the launch, the Kings came back. It started with a letter, then a call. Then one day, they showed up at my office. Mrs. King entered, dressed in black, clutching a rosary as if to look pitiful. James followed behind, eyes down, avoiding mine. "Lila," she said softly, we just wanted to talk. Talk, I replied, my tone calm, steady. "Funny. That's something you never let me do when I lived under your roof." Mrs. King sighed dramatically. "We've lost everything. The business is gone. The house was repossessed. James, I don't care," I cut in. "You made your choices." James finally spoke. "Lila, I was wrong. I know that now. Don't," I said sharply. "You don't get to rewrite what you did. You married me to keep your inheritance, not because you loved me. You watched your family humiliate me every single day. You let them lock me out of my own room, starve me, treat me like a maid." He lowered his head. "I was weak. You were cruel," I corrected. "There's a difference." Mrs. King stepped forward, tears brimming. "We've come to ask for forgiveness. Maybe a place to stay until we get back on our feet." I almost laughed. The same woman who once forced me to eat in the servants' quarters now wanted shelter from me. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "The foundation offers aid to women and children in need. Unfortunately, we don't house manipulators." Her lips trembled. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm more than serious," I said. "I'm free." And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there, surrounded by portraits of the smiling girls whose futures I was rebuilding. That night, I sat in my quiet home, my real home, overlooking the city lights. For the first time, I didn't feel alone, because I had finally understood something powerful. You don't need to be born into love or wealth to deserve it. You can create it from the ashes of what tried to destroy you. But just as I began to feel peace, a call came through. "Ms. Lila," my assistant said nervously, "you should see this. There's a news report." I clicked the link she sent. The headline read, "King family under investigation. Fraud, forgery, and hidden offshore accounts exposed." My jaw tightened. It wasn't just karma catching up, it was justice. They had been laundering money for years, and the investigation revealed documents, signed by James. He'd been using my name as a cover for fake charity funds. My foundation's name had been forged in transactions to conceal their crimes. I felt my stomach twist. Even after losing everything, they had found one last way to drag me down. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and said to myself, "Not this time." I had fought too hard to be their victim again. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, armed with every document, every timeline, every traceable piece of proof that could clear my name. And this time, I wouldn't be the quiet girl in the corner, because I wasn't the orphan they discarded anymore. I was the woman they could never break, and I was about to show the world what happens when you underestimate the girl you called worthless. The days that followed were a whirlwind. News crews showed up at the foundation, not for me personally, but for the story of the King family's exposure, and, indirectly, the woman who had survived their cruelty. Everywhere I went, people whispered, "That's Noor Arif." Some stared in awe, others in disbelief. I learned quickly how powerful visibility could be. It wasn't just about wealth. It wasn't about revenge. It was about being seen. Finally, unapologetically, I held a press conference at the foundation. Cameras flashed, Microphones pointed at me, and for the first time, I felt a wave of calm wash over me. I spoke about the orphanage, the girls, and the importance of creating opportunity for those who are overlooked. I didn't mention the Malik family or the Kings. I didn't need to. Their own mistakes spoke louder than my words ever could. That night, I returned to my apartment, exhausted, but alive in a way I never had been. I poured a cup of tea, sat by the window, and let myself finally breathe. It was then that I received an unexpected visitor. A young man, tall and kind-eyed, knocked on my door. "Miss Arif?" he asked hesitantly. "Yes," I replied, curious. "I work for the orphanage you grew up in. I wanted to thank you personally. Because of you, children now have hope." I smiled faintly. "Thank you. That means more than you can imagine." He handed me a small worn notebook. "It belonged to one of the girls who never made it through the system," he said softly. I thought, maybe you'd like to read her words. I opened it and read pages filled with hope, despair, dreams, and tiny sketches of a world they wanted to see. And in that moment, I realized something profound. My journey wasn't about revenge or wealth. It was about giving back what I had been denied. Over the next few months, I expanded the foundation. We opened workshops, funded micro-businesses, and partnered with schools to ensure girls had access to education they might never have gotten. Meanwhile, the King family was completely exposed. Their fraud, lies, and manipulations became a case study in the media. Mrs. Malik tried to salvage her reputation, but no one listened. James tried to recover, but every door he knocked on closed. And Rehan, he came to me once quietly, seeking advice, but I had nothing to give him. He had watched, silent, while they destroyed me. Now he was left to watch their empire crumble. And as I looked at the city skyline from my office, I thought about how far I had come. The orphan girl who once begged for kindness now commanded respect. The girl they tried to break now built futures for hundreds of girls like her. But even with all this power, I remained careful, humble, and grounded. Because I knew one thing, life could turn on a dime. Power without purpose is meaningless. And my purpose was clear: to lift the fallen, to protect the voiceless, and to never forget the girl I used to be. That's when the twist came. A phone call from someone I never expected. "Miss Noor Arif?" a voice asked. "Yes, I'm a distant relative of Mr. Samir Arif. He wanted to ensure you received a message." Personally, my heart skipped. It was another link to the family I never knew, the one that had cared for me before the world decided otherwise. The caller smiled over the line. "You've done him proud, and he would be thrilled to see the woman you've become. There's one more piece of the estate, a villa in the mountains. He wanted it for you, to remind you that life isn't just survival. It's also beauty." I closed my eyes and let the tears fall. The girl who had nothing now had everything. Not just money, not just power, but freedom, respect, and a future she had fought for herself. And as the sun set over the city, I whispered to the reflection in the glass, "You can take everything from a girl, but you can't take her spirit. Never her spirit." The villa in the mountains was more than a house. It was a symbol of the life I had fought to claim. When I first walked through its doors, sunlight streaming through the tall windows, I felt a kind of peace I had never known. No one was judging me here. No one was mocking me. No one was trying to make me small. It was mine. Every corner, every brick, every view of the rolling hills outside. I spent the first few days unpacking slowly, savoring the moment. I hung photographs of the orphanage, the girls I had met, and the few memories I had of my uncle. And in a quiet corner, I placed the ring that once felt like a chain. It no longer felt heavy. Now it reminded me that the pain I endured had forged strength. Back in the city, Arif Textiles was thriving. The girls from the orphanage were excelling. Scholarships, apprenticeships, and mentorship programs multiplied. And every time I walked into the office, employees greeted me with respect, not fear, not doubt. I had built not just a company, but a community. One afternoon, as I walked through the Foundation's new library, I saw a young girl staring at me with wide eyes. "Are you really Noor Arif?" she asked softly. "Yes," I said, smiling. "I am," she hesitated. "But you were poor. You had nothing. How did you do all this?" I knelt beside her and took her hand. "You know," I said, "being poor doesn't mean being powerless. You just have to find your strength. And sometimes, the world will try to take everything from you. But the one thing it can't take is your spirit." She smiled, a little hesitant but hopeful. And in that moment, I saw myself, the girl who had been silent, ignored, and underestimated. That night, I returned to the villa, looking out at the mountains as the sky turned shades of gold and violet. I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, the orphanage that had been my home, the family that had tried to break me, the inheritance that had changed my life, the foundation that had given purpose to my pain. I realized something important. My story wasn't just about revenge or wealth. It was about transformation, about taking what life tried to deny me and using it to create hope, not just for myself, but for countless others. And somewhere deep inside, I finally forgave the world, not because it deserved forgiveness, but because I had to let go to fully embrace my future. I am Noor Arif, the girl who had nothing, the girl they all underestimated, the girl who took her pain and turned it into purpose. And now, my legacy would live on, not in gold or power, but in every life I touched, every girl I helped rise, every story I inspired. Because the world may try to break you, but it can never take your spirit. And that, I had learned, was the greatest inheritance of all. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment revenge, so that we could understand you were with us till the end. As well as, please let us know, where are you watching from? What do you want to hear from us in next video? If you have any incident in your life, please let us know. We would love to share your story.